You know, if you wanted to say, I want to get the best option, what is that? The answer is the best option is... The most frequent question that I get asked when it comes to handmade shoes is about the waist. How the waist is constructed, what it is that they should be requesting, who makes it the best, which one should I go with? And that's what I want to talk about today. Is I want to share these examples from Acme Shoemaker and talk about the different construction types, different aesthetics around the waist. Now, this is going to be strictly an informational video. I'm not going to get into the merits of which is better, but really just go over and do a visual walkthrough, as well as provide a little bit of context. So that way, if you know what the particular aesthetic is that you're aiming for, you'll know which type of waist to request. Let's start with the most classic and the most refined, the one that you're going to see most frequently, a fully hand-welded shoe. This has a blind welded waist, and this really kind of creates the epitome of what most would associate with that blind welted waist. Now, what that means is basically when we look around the forefoot here, you're going to see a welt out stitch, which is the outsole stitch going around the actual forefoot of the shoe. And then as you get into the waist, you no longer are able to see that welt stitching, but it is still welted. And the way that this is closed and beveled underneath the shape of the upper, it blinds that stitch and it makes it so that it looks like there is no welt. It's blinded underneath the upper, and that's kind of the most classic look that you see with a fully handmade shoe, a bespoke shoe, is that when this disappears, that's the blind welded waist. The next example here, this is a 180-degree Norwegian construction. So that means that the front half of the shoe has a Norwegian braid. It has a Norwegian construction executed on it. And then moving through the rest of the shoe, this is a blind pegged waist. But if I rotate this in the light, you can see a few indentations there. And basically what they're doing is constructing this with a pegged waist, and then they're blinding that by concealing it underneath the actual outsole. So it's creating a very similar aesthetic, but the difference is just the technique that they're using to create that aesthetic. Overall, it's still a handmade shoe. It's still creating a very, very reminiscent aesthetic to what we looked at in the first example. The main difference is that from here to here, it's not a hand-sewn welt, it's pegged, and that is how that is constructed and reinforced throughout to the heel of the shoe. The next most common example here is where you can actually see the stitching on the outsole through the waist. And this is just one of many examples that you're going to come across. This one has a 270-degree Norwegian construction. Because of that, it's not a waist that could be blinded or have an aesthetic that makes it appear like a blind welded waist. This is a 270-degree Norwegian construction. And then as we go around here, you can see that the actual outsole stitch is visible throughout that entire 270-degree route, all the way through the heel, at which point it is constructed the same as any of the other heels that we've looked at so far, where there's a leather heel stack there called a rand, and that is what everything is built upon from a structural standpoint. So if we look at these three examples here, this is a fully hand-welded shoe with a blind welted waist. The key difference with this is you see the outsole stitching, and then the welt continues all the way to the heel, but right here, starting right there to here, that has been beveled and blinded under, so you don't actually see the welt from the side or the top, but the welt is there, and it is hand sewn, and then this is laid over to create a fully closed channel or blind stitch outsole. Moving on to this one, it has the very similar aesthetic as the first one. The difference here is this is a 180-degree Norwegian construction. And then while this has a similar aesthetic on the waist, this is pegged. This is not hand sewn through the waist, it's a pegged construction. And then finally, another example, and this is going to be a similar aesthetic to something without a Norwegian construction, but just a regular 270-degree construction. This has the outsole stitch visible all the way to the heel of the shoe. You know, if you wanted to say, I want to get the best option, what is that? The answer is whatever you actually want. If you don't mind whether it's pegged or welded, you just want to make sure it's not like a cemented construction, or that it's actually one of many traditional shoe construction methods, then it's not that big of a deal which one you go with. They all have structural integrity. They're all going to last you a very, very long time, and they're all repairable, resolable. I think the key thing is that these are all traditional shoe methods. These are all construction methods which are recognized throughout the industry. And the most important part is that you understand what it is that you're purchasing. You're purchasing what it is that you actually want to acquire. And the shoemaker is letting you know what those options are and what the available options are that you can choose from. At that point, it really boils down to what aesthetic you prefer, whether or not a particular style or a particular construction type matches up with the budget that you have set aside for that shoe. I can appreciate them all, and as you can see, that is why I have a variety of them all. Let me know if you have any questions or if you'd like to see some more close-ups of these examples, and I will do my best to share that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.